At noon on a deserted road, a black man suddenly slammed on the brakes when he saw a luxury car flipped on its side. Even knowing it could lead to trouble, he still got out to check. Inside, an elderly man was trapped, gasping for air, trembling as he begged, "Please save my wife first." Beside him lay an unconscious elderly woman. Without hesitation, he took off his shirt, pressed it against her wound, called for emergency help, and followed them to hospital, caring for them as if they were his own family. But when their son finally arrived, he wasn't thanked. He was looked at as a suspect. And then he did something that shocked everyone. Before we dive into the story, let us know where you're watching from in the comments. Drop it in the comments. The hospital parking lot at 6 a.m. cold, empty, a black man in worn jeans and a faded work jacket stood near the entrance, hands in his pockets, watching the automatic doors open and close for people who weren't him. He had been coming here every day for 2 weeks. Same spot, same time, same silence. The nurses recognized him now. Not his name, just his face. The man who waited. The man who asked nothing. The man who shouldn't be here but kept showing up anyway. Inside on the 3rd floor, an old man lay in a coma. Machines breathed for him. Monitors beeped in rhythm. No one knew when he would wake, if he would wake. And somewhere across town, in a house that didn't belong to her, an old woman sat by a window she didn't recognize, asking questions no one could answer. Where am I? Who brought me here? Where is my husband? The man in the parking lot knew the answers, but he wasn't sure anyone would believe him if he told them. His name was Terrence, 47 years old. No wife, no children, no family to speak of. He worked odd jobs when he could find them. Construction mostly, sometimes loading trucks at the warehouse on Route 9. He lived in a small wooden house at the edge of town, the kind of house people drove past without noticing, the kind of house that looked like it was waiting to fall down. He didn't own much. A truck that needed new brakes. A television that only got 3 channels. A Bible his mother gave him before she died. The spine cracked, the pages soft from years of handling. He was not a hero. He had never saved anyone. He had never been anyone's answer to anything until 2 weeks ago. Now he stood in this parking lot every morning, waiting for news about a man he didn't know, worrying about a woman he had no business worrying about, caught in a story that wasn't his to tell. The automatic doors opened. A nurse stepped out, the young one with the short hair, the one who always looked at him like she was trying to solve a puzzle. "Mr. Hartwell's condition hasn't changed," she said. "Still stable, still unconscious." Terrence nodded. "Thank you." She hesitated. "Are you family?" "No." "Friend?" "No." "Then why do you keep coming?" Terrence didn't answer. He just looked at her with eyes that had seen too much and explained too little. And after a moment, she turned and walked back inside. He stayed another hour. Then he drove across town to check on the old woman. The house was small and old, and it smelled like coffee and would smoke. Mrs. Hartwell sat in the same chair she always sat in, wrapped in a blanket that wasn't hers, staring at photographs on the wall that weren't of her family. "Good morning," Terrence said. She looked up. Her eyes were cloudy, confused, searching for something familiar in his face. "Do I know you?" "Yes, ma'am. I'm Terrence. I've been helping you." "Helping me with what?" "Just being here." She nodded slowly, accepting this answer the way she accepted everything now, without fully understanding it. Her memory came and went like radio stations on a long drive. Clear one moment, static the next. "Is my husband coming today?" Terrence felt the weight of that question in his chest. "He's resting, ma'am. He'll come when he's better. He's always working, always busy. I tell him to slow down, but he never listens." "Yes, ma'am." "Are you his friend from the company?" "Something like that." She smiled. The kind of smile that breaks your heart because it trusts so easily. "That's nice. It's nice to have friends." Terrence made her breakfast. Oatmeal with honey, the way she liked it. He washed the dishes. He made sure she took her pills. He sat with her on the porch when the sun got warm enough, listening to her talk about people he'd never met, places he'd never been, a life that had nothing to do with him. The neighbors watched. He could feel their eyes from behind curtains and through screen doors. A black man going in and out of a house where an old white woman lived alone. In a town like this, that was enough to start whispers. He heard them at the gas station, at the grocery store, at the diner where he sometimes got coffee. Who is he? What's he doing with that old lady? Something ain't right about it. The police came on the fourth day. 2 officers, both white, both young, both looking at him like he was a problem waiting to happen. Sir, we've had some calls. People concerned about the elderly woman staying at your residence. She's not at my residence. I'm at hers, sort of. What does that mean? It means I'm helping her until her family can be found. And who are you to her? Terrence took a breath. He had answered this question so many times now, to doctors, to nurses, to social workers, to anyone who looked at him and saw what they expected to see. I'm the one who stopped, he said. The officers exchanged glances. Stop for what? The accident. 2 weeks ago out on Miller Road. I found them. I called for help. I stayed. And you've been taking care of her ever since. Someone had to. The older officer, the one with the mustache, leaned closer. Sir, I need to ask you directly. What is your relationship to these people? Terrence looked him in the eye. Tired, not angry, just tired. I don't have one, he said. I'm just a man who didn't drive away. 2 weeks earlier. You're listening to an original story from the official Shiny Stories channel. The call came at 3:47 in the morning. Terrence was not asleep. He had been lying on his couch, staring at the ceiling, listening to the silence of a house that felt too empty now. His phone rang, and he answered before the second ring. Mr. Terrence, this is Dr. Patterson from County General. Benjamin Hartwell is awake. Terrence sat up. His heart was pounding. How is he? Disoriented but stable. His vitals are strong. He's been asking for his wife. Does he remember what happened? He remembers everything. Terrence was at the hospital in 20 minutes. He didn't think about what he was doing or why. He just drove through the dark streets, past the empty fields, toward the small brick building where a man who had been sleeping for 2 weeks had finally opened his eyes. Vincent was already there when Terrence arrived. Of course he was. He had probably been notified first, by the private nurse he hired, by the doctors who now knew this family had money and connections and mattered in ways that Terrence never would. They stood in the hallway outside Benjamin's room, and for a moment neither of them spoke. He's awake, Vincent said. His voice was strange, shaky. I heard. He wants to see you. Terrence stopped. Me? He asked for you by name. Described you. Said you were the one who saved them. Vincent's jaw tightened. He's been awake for 2 hours. The first thing he asked about was Margaret. The second thing he asked about was the man who stopped on Miller Road. I should let you have time with him first. You're his family. He specifically asked that you come in. Vincent looked at Terrence with an expression that was hard to read. Confusion, frustration. Something that might have been the beginning of humility. He was very insistent. The hospital room was quiet except for the beeping of machines. Benjamin Hartwell lay in the bed, thinner than Terrence remembered, older somehow, but his eyes were open and they were clear, sharp, the eyes of a man who had been in darkness and had finally found his way back to the light. Margaret sat beside him, holding his hand, crying softly, not sad tears, happy tears, the kind that come when something you thought was lost returns to you. Benjamin. She kept saying, my Benjamin, you came back. I'm here, Ellie. I'm not going anywhere. Benjamin looked up when Terrence entered. Their eyes met across the room and Terrence saw recognition, gratitude, something deeper than words. You, Benjamin said. His voice was hoarse, weak from weeks of silence. You're the one, Mr. Hartwell. I'm glad you're awake. Come closer, please. Terrence walked to the bedside. Margaret looked up at him and smiled. That trusting smile that broke his heart every time. Benjamin, this is Terrence. He's been taking care of me. I know who he is. Benjamin reached out with his free hand, the one not holding Margaret's, and took Terrence's hand in a grip that was surprisingly strong. I remember everything. The accident. The pain, lying there thinking I was going to die. And then you were there. I just happened to be on that road, sir. Don't do that. Don't minimize what you did. Benjamin's eyes were wet. I remember what I said to you. Save her first. I was watching you. Even though I could barely move, I watched you use your own shirt to stop her bleeding. I watched you stay with us when anyone else would have run. I couldn't leave you. Why not? You didn't know us. You had every reason to keep driving. Terrence thought about that question. He had asked himself the same thing 100 times over the past 2 weeks. Why didn't he keep driving? Why did he stop? Why did he stay? Because my mother taught me that being in the right place at the right time means something, he said finally. And I was there. I was the only one there. So I stayed. Benjamin held his hand tighter. Tears rolled down the old man's weathered cheeks. The doctors told me that Margaret would have died without immediate pressure on that wound. They told me that 20 more minutes and she would have bled out on that dirt road. You saved her life. You saved my wife's life. I did what anyone would do. No. Benjamin's voice was firm despite its weakness. Anyone would have called 911 and kept driving. Anyone would have told themselves it wasn't their problem. You stopped. You stayed. You took my wife into your home when no one else would have her. He looked past Terrence to where Vincent stood in the doorway, watching, listening. My son tells me you refuse money. I don't want money. Why not? Because I didn't help you for money. I helped because you needed help. Benjamin was quiet for a long moment. Then he turned to Vincent. Son, come here. Vincent walked forward slowly, like a man approaching something he wasn't sure how to face. He stood beside Terrence at his father's bedside, and the three of them formed a strange triangle, connected by circumstances none of them had chosen. I want you to listen to me carefully, Benjamin said. I don't know how much time I have left. This accident reminded me that any day could be my last. So I'm going to say some things I should have said a long time ago. Vincent's face was tight, controlled, but Terrence could see the cracks. Dad, you should rest. We can talk later. No. We put off talking for 3 years. I'm not waiting another minute. Benjamin looked at his son with eyes full of regret and love. I was wrong. About the business. About the argument we had. About all of it. I was too proud to admit it and too stubborn to reach out. I wasted 3 years being angry about something that doesn't matter. Dad, let me finish. While I was lying in that car, bleeding, thinking I was going to die, do you know what I thought about? Not the company, not the deals, not any of the things I spent my life building. I thought about your mother. I thought about you. I thought about all the time I wasted being important instead of being present. Benjamin's voice cracked. And then this man appeared, a stranger, someone who had nothing to do with our lives. He could have left us there to die, and no one would have blamed him. But he didn't. He stayed. He held your mother's head in his hands, and he talked to me to keep me conscious, and he waited for help that took too long to arrive. He looked at Terrence. You did more for my family in one afternoon than I did in decades. You showed up. You stayed. That's all that matters. That's the only thing that ever matters. Margaret reached out and took Terrence's other hand. So now he was connected to both of them. This old couple had been strangers 3 weeks ago and had become something else entirely. You're a good man, Terrence, she said. Her eyes were clear today, clearer than he had seen them. I don't always remember things, but I remember that. I remember feeling safe when you were there. Terrence didn't trust his voice. He just nodded. Vincent stood there, watching, and Terrence could see something shifting in him. The walls he had built, the assumptions he had made, the story he had told himself about who Terrence was and what he wanted, all of it crumbling in the face of his father's words. I owe you an apology, Vincent said quietly. I came here thinking the worst. I assumed you had an angle, that you were taking advantage of my mother's condition. You were protecting your family. I understand. No, I was being the same man my father just described. Too important, too suspicious, too ready to see the worst in people. Vincent's voice was heavy with something that might have been shame. My father has been in a coma for 2 weeks. My mother has been confused and scared. And while I was too busy to answer the phone, a stranger was taking care of them. sleeping on his couch, visiting the hospital every day, cooking oatmeal with honey because that's how she likes it. How do you know about the oatmeal? She told me yesterday. She doesn't remember much, but she remembers that. She remembers you learning how to make it right. Terrence felt something tight in his chest, something that had been locked away for a long time. I should go, he said. Let you have time with your family. Stay. It was Margaret who spoke. Please, you're part of this now. Ma'am, I'm not. You're part of this, Benjamin repeated, his grip on Terrence's hand tightening. Whether you planned it or not, whether you wanted it or not, you're part of our family now. Terrence looked at them, this wealthy old couple who had everything he never had, this successful son who lived in a world Terrence would never understand. They were offering him something he had never been offered before. Belonging, connection, a place at the table. And for the first time in his life, he didn't know how to say no. The next few days were a strange blend of endings and beginnings. Benjamin grew stronger every day. His memory was intact, his mind sharp, his body slowly recovering from the trauma of the accident. Margaret's confusion persisted, but with Benjamin awake, she seemed calmer, more anchored. He was her true north, the fixed point around which her fractured mind had organized itself. Vincent stayed in town, working remotely, visiting his parents at the hospital every day. He was different now, quieter, more thoughtful. The arrogance had softened into something more human. He came to Terrence's house one evening, alone. Can we talk? They sat on the porch, watching the sun go down. Two men from different worlds trying to find common ground. My father told me about the bridges, Vincent said, the ones he built. He said he spent his whole life making sure things held together. And then he said something else. He said that you held our family together when he couldn't. That's generous of him. It's the truth. Vincent was quiet for a moment. I've spent my entire adult life trying to be successful, building companies, making money, proving myself. And somewhere along the way, I forgot what any of it was for. What is it for? That's the question, isn't it? Vincent looked at Terrence. You have nothing. No family, no money, no status. And yet you did something that I, with all my resources, couldn't do. You showed up. You were present. You cared. Anyone would have done the same. No, they wouldn't have. That's what I'm trying to tell you. Most people don't stop. Most people don't stay. Most people find excuses to protect themselves from other people's problems. Vincent shook his head. I know because I'm one of them. I've spent 3 years avoiding my own father because I was too proud to admit I was wrong. You're here now because a stranger shamed me into it. Because you did what I should have done. Because my father woke up from a coma and the first person he wanted to see was the man who held my mother's bleeding head in his hands. Terrence didn't know what to say to that, so he said nothing. I want to do something for you, Vincent said. Not as payment, not as charity, as, I don't know what to call it, acknowledgement, recognition of what you did. I don't need anything. Everyone needs something. Terrence thought about that, about his empty life, about the years of being invisible, about the way people looked at him, looked through him, assumed the worst before he even opened his mouth. I don't want money, he said finally, but there is something. Name it. I want people to stop looking at me like I'm a criminal. I want the whispers to stop. I want to walk into a grocery store without the cashier watching my hands. I want to pump gas without someone calling police. Vincent was quiet for a long time. That's what you want. That's all. It's not a small thing. Not to me. No, I imagine it's not. Vincent looked at him differently now, not with suspicion, not with pity. Something else, something like respect. I can't change how people think, but I can make sure they know the truth about what happened here. I can make sure your name is cleared. I can make sure the police know you're not a suspect, but a hero. I'm not a hero. You are to my family. The next day, Vincent held a press conference at the hospital. Terrence wasn't there, didn't want to be, but he heard about it afterward. Vincent told the whole story. The accident, the man who stopped, The weeks of care, the sacrifice of a stranger who had nothing but gave everything. The local paper ran the story, then the regional paper. Then somehow it spread further, the way stories do in the age of social media, until Terrence's name was being mentioned in places he had never heard of, by people he would never meet. Reporters came to town. Terrence refused to speak to them. He didn't want fame. He didn't want attention. He just wanted to be left alone. But something changed in how people looked at him. The whispers stopped. The suspicious glances faded. The cashier at the grocery store smiled at him for the first time in years. "I saw the story," she said. "I'm sorry for what I said before, about folks talking. It's okay." "No, it's not. We should have known better. You've lived here your whole life. We should have known who you were." Terrence didn't point out that knowing someone your whole life doesn't mean you know them at all. He just nodded and paid for his groceries and went home. That evening, there was a knock on his door. Margaret stood on his porch, leaning on Benjamin's arm, both of them smiling. "We want to say goodbye," Margaret said. "Vincent is taking us back to New York tomorrow." "I know. I hope the doctors there can help you." "They will." Benjamin shook Terrence's hand. "But before we go, I want you to know something. You have a family now. Whether you want one or not, we're your family. And family doesn't end just because you're in different places. Mr. Hartwell." "Benjamin. Call me Benjamin. You've earned that." Margaret hugged him. Tight, long, the kind of hug that says more than words ever could. "Thank you," she whispered, "for not leaving me alone." "You were never alone, ma'am." "Not really." They left the next morning. Terrence watched the cars pull away, watched the dust settle on the road, watched his strange temporary family disappear toward a life that had nothing to do with him. The story was over. His life could go back to normal. But normal felt different now. Smaller, lonelier, because Terrence had learned something in those 3 weeks. Something he hadn't known he was missing. He had learned what it felt like to matter to someone, to be seen, to be needed, to be part of something bigger than himself. And now that he knew, he couldn't unknow it. The empty house felt emptier. The quiet nights felt quieter. The life he had been living felt less like a life and more like an existence. But the story wasn't over. Not yet, because 3 days later, another car pulled up to his house. And the people inside had one more thing to say. This story is produced by the official channel Shiny Stories. The car was not as fancy as Vincent's SUV. A simple rental sedan, blue, dusty from the drive. It parked in front of Terrence's house on a Thursday afternoon. And when the door opened, Vincent stepped out. Alone. Terrence was on the porch, fixing a loose board. He set down his hammer and waited. "I thought you went back to New York." "I did. I came back." "Why?" Vincent walked across the yard slowly, like a man who had been thinking about this moment for a long time and still wasn't sure how to handle it. "Because I realized something. Something I couldn't say over the phone." He stopped at the bottom of the porch steps, looked up at Terrence. The arrogance was gone now. The suspicion was gone. What remained was something raw, honest, uncertain. "I was wrong about you. I was wrong about a lot of things. You already apologized." "That was an apology. This is different. This is me admitting that I don't know how to be the person you are." Vincent shook his head slowly. "I've spent my whole life measuring people by what they have. Money, power, status. And then I met someone who was none of those things. And he turned out to be more valuable than anyone I've ever known." Terrence didn't know what to say, so he waited. "My mother talks about you every day. Did you know that? Her memory is still fragmented. But she remembers you. She remembers the oatmeal, the porch, the way you listened when she told stories about people who don't exist. She calls you her guardian angel. I'm no angel. Maybe not, but you're the closest thing to one my family has ever met." Vincent reached into his jacket and pulled out a thick envelope, different from the last one, heavier. "Before you say no, I want you to hear me out. I already told you I don't want money. I know. This isn't payment. It's not charity either." Vincent held out the envelope, but didn't push it forward. "My father set up a trust in your name. It's not a gift. It's an investment. In you. in whatever you want to do with your life. I don't understand. There's enough in there to fix this house, to buy a reliable truck, to go back to school if you want, or start a business, or just have a cushion so you don't have to worry about the electric bill every month. Vincent's voice was quiet, sincere. It's not about what you did for us. It's about who you are, and who you are deserves more than what you have. Terrence looked at the envelope. He thought about his mother, about the years of struggle, about the jobs that broke his body and paid nothing, about the empty refrigerator and the final notices, and the constant grinding weight of being poor in a world that measured worth in dollars. I can't accept that. Why not? Because I didn't save your parents to be saved back. Vincent nodded slowly, like he expected this answer. Can I tell you something my father said after I told him you refused the first envelope? What? He said, that's exactly why he deserves it. He said the people who refuse help are usually the ones who need it most. And the people who don't want recognition are usually the ones who've never gotten any. Terrence felt something tighten in his throat. I don't know how to accept things from people. I've never had anyone offer. I know. That's part why this matters. Vincent set the envelope on the porch railing. You don't have to decide now. Take your time. Think about it. But I want you to know that this isn't charity. It's acknowledgement. It's my family saying that you matter, that what you did matters, that you deserve to be seen. Terrence stared at the envelope. He didn't touch it. There's something else I want, he said finally. Something that isn't in any envelope. Name it. I want people to stop looking at me like I'm less than them. I want to walk down the street without wondering if someone is going to cross to the other side. I want to exist in this world without having to prove I belong here. Vincent was quiet for a long moment. I can't give you that. I wish I could, but I can do something else. What? I can make sure that everyone who hears this story knows the truth. Not just about what you did, but about who you are. I can use my resources, my connections, my platform to make sure that your name means something. Not famous, not viral, just respected, known for the right reasons. Why would you do that? Because you taught me something. Something I didn't learn in business school or boardrooms or any of the places I thought mattered. Vincent looked at him directly. You taught me that the measure of a man isn't what he has. It's what he does when no one is watching. It's who he helps when he has nothing to gain. It's whether he stops on a dirt road when everyone else drives by. Terrence felt his eyes burn. He blinked it away. Your father said something like that. At the accident, he said he spent his whole life building bridges. He did. Real ones. The kind people drive across. He said he wanted to make sure things held together. And you held my family together when he couldn't. Vincent stepped back. The envelope is yours. Do whatever you want with it. But Terrence, I want you to know something. You're not invisible anymore. Not to my family. Not to anyone who hears this story. You matter. And you deserve to know that. He got back in his car, started the engine, rolled down the window. My parents want you to visit. When you're ready. They have a guest room with your name on it. I've never been to New York. Then it's time. Vincent smiled. A real smile. The first one Terrence had seen from him. Family takes care of family. And like it or not, you're family now. The car pulled away. The dust settled. And Terrence stood on his porch, looking at a thick envelope that represented everything he had never allowed himself to want. He didn't open it. Not yet. But for the first time in his life, he let himself imagine what it might feel like to accept something he hadn't earned. To be valued, not for what he could give, but for who he was. It felt terrifying and wonderful and strange. It felt like the beginning of something new. You're listening to an original story from the official Shiny Stories channel. 6 months later. The house looked different now. Fresh paint, new roof, a porch that didn't creak when you walked across it. Terrence had done most of the work himself. But this time he had money for proper materials. Good wood quality nails. Things that would last. He stood in the kitchen making coffee, looking out the window at the morning sun. The electric bill on the counter was paid. The truck in the driveway was reliable. The refrigerator was full. Small things, ordinary things, but they meant everything to a man who had spent his whole life without them. The phone rang. He already knew who it was before he answered. "Good morning, Terrence." Margaret's voice was stronger now, clearer. The doctors in New York had found a treatment that helped with her memory. She still had bad days, but the good days were more frequent. "Did you sleep well?" "Yes, ma'am." "Did you? I dreamed about your porch, the one where we used to sit in the afternoons. I miss that porch. It's still here. Any time you want to visit. Benjamin says we're coming next month. He wants to see the repairs you made. He keeps telling everyone about the man who saved his wife and then rebuilt his own house with his own hands." Terrence smiled. "Tell him the roof doesn't leak anymore. He'll be pleased." He was very concerned about that roof. They talked for a few more minutes. Small talk, weather, health, the kind of conversation that means nothing and everything at the same time. The kind of conversation that family has. After he hung up, Terrence sat on his new porch with his coffee. The sun was warm. The birds were singing. A car drove past on the road, and the driver waved. Terrence waved back. 6 months ago, people in this town looked at him with suspicion. Now they looked at him with respect. Not because he had money. Not because he was famous. Because they knew his story. They knew what he had done. And they knew that the measure of a man isn't what he has, but what he does when no one is watching. Vincent had kept his promise. The story spread, not as a viral sensation, not as clickbait, but as something quieter and more lasting. A story people told each other about the stranger who stopped, the man who stayed, the person who proved that kindness still existed in a world that had forgotten how to look for it. Terrence had used some of the money from the trust. Not all of it, just enough to fix what was broken, to stabilize what was shaky, to give himself a foundation he had never had before. The rest sat in an account, waiting for a purpose he hadn't figured out yet. He had visited New York twice, stayed in the guest room with his name on it, ate dinners with Benjamin and Margaret and Vincent's wife, and their 2 children who called him Uncle Terrence, even though they had only met him a handful of times. Family. The word still felt strange in his mouth, but it was starting to feel less like a foreign language and more like something he was slowly learning to speak. A truck pulled into his driveway. Terrence recognized it. Old Pete from the hardware store. The man who had given him odd jobs for years, who had never paid him quite enough, but had never looked at him with suspicion either. "Morning, Terrence." "Morning, Pete. Got a delivery for you. From New York." Pete pulled a large box from the back of his truck. Terrence helped him carry it to the porch. Inside was a rocking chair. Beautiful wood, handcrafted, a note attached. "For your porch, so you have somewhere comfortable to sit when we visit. Margaret." Terrence ran his hand over the smooth wood. He thought about the old woman who had come into his life by accident and stayed by choice. He thought about her husband who had asked a stranger to save his wife and then treated that stranger like a son. He thought about their actual son who had arrived with suspicion and left with respect. He set the chair on the porch, sat down, rocked slowly, feeling the smooth motion, looking out at the road where everything had started. Miller Road was 15 miles from here. 15 miles of dirt and gravel and nothing. He still drove it, sometimes. Not to remember, but to remind himself that life can change in an instant, that the smallest choice can have the biggest consequences, that stopping when everyone else drives by is sometimes the most important thing a person can do. He thought about his mother, what she would say if she could see him now. He thought she would be proud, not because of the money or the house or the chair, because he had done the right thing when it was hard, because he had stayed when it would have been easier to leave, because he had proven that the values she taught him weren't just words. The sun climbed higher. The coffee grew cold. Terrence sat in his new chair on his fixed porch. A man who had nothing and gained everything. Not money, not fame, something better. Purpose, connection, belonging, a family he never expected, a life he never imagined. All because he made one choice on a hot afternoon on a dirt road in the middle of nowhere. He didn't drive away. He stopped, and that made all the difference. The end? No, not really, because stories like this don't end. They ripple. They spread. They plant seeds in the hearts of people who hear them. Maybe you're watching this right now, thinking about a time when you drove past, a time when you saw someone in need and told yourself it wasn't your problem, a time when you could have stopped but didn't. That's okay. We've all been there. We've all made that choice. But here's the thing about choices. You get to make new ones. Every day, every moment, every time you see someone struggling on the side of the road, literal or metaphorical, you can drive by or you can stop. Terrence stopped, and it changed everything. For him, for Benjamin and Margaret, for Vincent, for an entire town that learned to see a man they had been looking through for 47 years. One choice, one moment, one person deciding that someone else's crisis mattered more than their own convenience. That's not a superpower. That's not an extraordinary ability. That's just humanity. The kind we all have inside us, waiting to be used. So here's my question for you. Who is waiting on your road? Who is broken down, flipped over, bleeding, hoping that someone will stop? It might be a stranger. It might be a neighbor. It might be a family member you've been too busy to call. It might be someone you see every day but never really notice. They're out there right now, waiting for someone to stop. Will it be you? If this story moved you, hit that subscribe button. Drop a comment below. What would you have done if you were Terrence? Would you have stopped? Share this with someone who needs to hear it. Someone who's forgotten that kindness matters. Someone who's been driving past too long. Because stories like this only work if they spread. And kindness only grows if we pass it on. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. Thank you for being the kind of person who stays until the end. Now go be the person who stops. Join us to share meaningful stories by hitting the like and subscribe buttons. Don't forget to turn on the notification bell to start your day with profound lessons and heartfelt empathy. The sun was brutal that day, the kind of heat that makes the air shimmer and the road look like it's melting. Terrence was driving back from a job site, a construction gig that was supposed to last until 5, but ended at noon because the contractor ran out of materials. Typical. Promise a full day's work, pay for half, send everyone home with an apology that meant nothing. His truck rattled along Miller Road with the windows down because the AC had died 3 summers ago, and he never had enough money to fix it. Miller Road was 15 miles of nothing, dirt and gravel, farmland on both sides, no houses, no gas stations, no cell towers strong enough to give you more than 1 bar if you were lucky. People took this road to avoid the highway, to save 20 minutes, to be alone with their thoughts. Terrence took it because it was the only way home. He was thinking about dinner, about whether he had enough bread for a sandwich, about the electric bill sitting on his kitchen table, the one with final notice stamped in red. He was thinking about how tired he was, how his back ached, how 47 years old felt more like 67 when you spent your life lifting things for other people. He was not thinking about saving anyone. He was not thinking about being a hero. He was just a man driving home, wanting nothing more than a cold shower and a few hours of sleep before tomorrow came with its own set of problems. Then he saw the car. It was off the road, flipped on its side in the shallow ditch that ran along the field. A silver Mercedes, the kind of car that cost more than Terrence would make in 5 years, maybe 10. The windshield was shattered. The front end was crumpled like paper. Steam rose from the engine in thin white ribbons. Terrence slowed down. His first thought was not rescue. His first thought was trouble. A black man alone on a dirt road, standing next to a wrecked luxury car. He knew how that looked. He knew what people assumed. He knew that in a town like this, in a country like this, good intentions meant nothing when the wrong person told the wrong story. He should keep driving. Call 911 when he got to an area with better signal. Let someone else handle it. Someone who wouldn't have to explain themselves. Someone who wouldn't have to prove they weren't stealing from the wreck. He pressed the gas pedal. The truck moved forward. The wrecked car grew smaller in his rearview mirror. Then he heard it. Faint, almost nothing. A sound that could have been wind, or it could have been an animal, or it could have been something else entirely. A moan, human, weak, coming from inside that twisted metal. Terrence stopped the truck. He sat there for a long moment, hands gripping the steering wheel, staring at the road ahead. Empty. No other cars, no witnesses, no one to help, and no one to blame. He thought about his mother, dead now for 15 years. He thought about what she used to say when he was a boy, when he complained about things being unfair, when he asked why he had to be the one to do the hard thing. Because you're the one who's here, she would say. And being here means something. Terrence put the truck in reverse. He pulled off the road and walked toward the wreck, his boots crunching on gravel, his heart beating faster than it should. The closer he got, the worse it looked. The car had rolled at least once, maybe twice. Glass everywhere. The smell of gasoline mixing with the smell of hot metal and something else. Something copper and wrong. Blood. He reached the driver's side first. The door was crushed inward, the window gone. Inside, an old man was pinned behind the steering wheel, conscious but barely, his white shirt stained dark red, his breathing shallow and labored. His eyes were open, looking at Terrence with the kind of clarity that comes when the body knows it's in danger. "Please," the old man whispered. "My wife." Terrence looked past him to the passenger seat. An old woman, smaller, frilier, slumped against the crumpled door. Her eyes were closed. Blood ran from a wound on her temple, slow and steady, pooling on the leather seat beneath her. "Is she breathing?" Terrence asked. "I don't know. I can't reach her. I can't move." Terrence tried the passenger door. Jammed. He went around to the other side, found the rear door slightly open, and crawled inside. The car groaned with his weight. Glass bit into his palms. He ignored it. He reached over the seat and pressed 2 fingers to the woman's neck. A pulse. Weak, but there. "She's alive," he said. The old man made a sound, something between a sob and a prayer. "Thank God. Thank God." Terrence pulled out his phone. 1 bar, barely enough. He dialed 911 and got static, then a voice, then more static. "There's been an accident," he said, loud and clear, hoping the words would make it through. "Miller Road, about 8 miles past the county line. 2 people injured. Need ambulance. Need help now." The voice on the other end said something he couldn't understand. He repeated the location twice more. Then the call dropped. He didn't know if they heard him. He didn't know if anyone was coming. He was alone with 2 dying strangers and nothing but his hands and his judgment. The old woman needed pressure on that head wound. He knew that much from a first aid class he took years ago, back when he worked at a factory that required it. He pulled off his jacket, then his shirt, wadding the fabric into a compress. He pressed it against her temple, firm but gentle, the way they taught him. "Hold on," he said to her, though he didn't know if she could hear. "Help is coming. Just hold on." The old man watched him from the driver's seat, tears cutting tracks through the dust on his face. "What's your name?" Terrence asked, trying to keep him talking, trying to keep him conscious. "Benjamin. Benjamin Hartwell." "Okay, Benjamin. I'm Terrence. I'm going to stay with you until the ambulance gets here. My wife, her name is Margaret. We've been married 52 years. That's a long time." "Not long enough." Benjamin's voice cracked. "Please help her first. I can wait. I can hold on. But she's everything. Do you understand? She's everything." Terrence understood. Not because he had ever loved someone for 52 years. Not because he had ever been anyone's everything. But because he saw it in the old man's eyes. The kind of love that doesn't ask questions, that doesn't calculate costs, that just is. "I'm helping her," Terrence said. "I'm doing everything I can. Promise me, if you have to choose, if it comes to that, save her first." Terrence didn't answer. He couldn't make a promise like that. He wasn't a doctor. He wasn't trained for this. He was just a man with a bloody shirt pressed against a stranger's head, waiting for sirens that might never come. The minutes stretched. The sun beat down. The gasoline smell grew stronger. And Terrence tried not to think about what would happen if a spark found that leak, if the whole car went up with all of them inside. He talked to Benjamin to keep him calm. Asked about his life, his family, his work. Benjamin had been an engineer, built bridges, he said, real ones. The kind people drive across every day without thinking about who designed them, who calculated the load, who made sure they wouldn't fall. I spent my whole life making sure things held together, Benjamin said, his voice getting weaker. And now look at me. Can't even hold myself together. You're doing fine, Terrence said. You're still talking. That's a good sign. I have a son, Vincent. He lives in New York. We don't talk much anymore. He's busy, important, runs some kind of company. He'll come when he hears about this. Maybe. Benjamin closed his eyes. I wasn't a good father. I was always working, always somewhere else. Margaret raised him mostly. She did everything. She always did everything. Terrence checked Margaret's pulse again. Still there, still weak. The bleeding had slowed under the pressure, but she needed real help, the kind that came with machines and medicine and people who knew what they were doing. Stay with me, Benjamin. Don't fall asleep. I'm tired. I know, but you need to stay awake for Margaret. She's going to need you when she wakes up. 23 minutes. That's how long it took for the sirens to appear on the horizon, distant at first, then louder, then filling the air with their urgent wail. Terrence had never been so happy to hear that sound in his life. The ambulance came first, then a fire truck, then a police car, kicking up dust as it skidded to a stop. Paramedics swarmed the wreck. They had tools Terrence didn't recognize, equipment that cut through metal like butter. They got Benjamin out first, strapped him to a board, loaded him into the ambulance. Then they worked on Margaret, more carefully, more slowly, stabilizing her neck before they moved her. A police officer approached Terrence. Young, white, looking at him with that particular expression Terrence knew too well. The one that was half suspicion and half confusion. The one that said, "You don't fit here. You the one who called it in?" "Yes, sir." "You know these people?" "No, sir." "Then what were you doing out here?" "Driving home. Saw the car." "Stop." The officer wrote something in his notepad. "Anyone else see the accident?" "No, just me." "And you stayed with them this whole time." "Wasn't going to leave them alone." The officer looked at the bloody shirt still clutched in Terrence's hand, at the cuts on his palms, at the sweat and dirt covering his face. Something shifted in his expression, though Terrence couldn't tell if it was respect or just recalculation. "We'll need a statement. You'll have to come down to the station." "I understand. You did good here." The paramedics said another 20 minutes. The woman might not have made it. That pressure you kept on the wound probably saved her life. Terrence didn't feel like a hero. He felt tired. He felt empty. He felt like a man who had done what anyone should do and somehow knew that wasn't true. That most people wouldn't have stopped. That most people would have kept driving and told themselves it wasn't their problem. He watched the ambulance pull away, sirens blaring, carrying two people whose names he hadn't known an hour ago, whose lives had intersected with his for reasons he couldn't explain. The officer asked him one more question before letting him go. "Why did you stop?" "Really? A lot of people would have just kept going." Terrence thought about it, thought about his mother, thought about the empty house waiting for him, thought about all the times he had been invisible, passed over, looked through like he wasn't even there. "Because no one else did," he said. "And someone had to." He got back in his truck. The engine coughed twice before turning over. He drove home slowly, his hand still shaking, his shirt gone, his mind replaying those 23 minutes over and over again. He didn't know it yet, but his life had just changed forever. The old man and old woman in that ambulance, the strangers whose blood was still drying on his hands, they were about to become his responsibility in ways he never could have imagined. And the son Benjamin mentioned, the busy and important one who lived in New York and never called. He was about to learn that his parents had been saved by a man who had nothing, a man who stopped when no one else would, a man who was about to discover that sometimes the smallest act of kindness can pull you into a story you never asked to be part of. This story is produced by the official channel Shiny Stories. The hospital was 40 minutes away, the only one within 50 miles, a 2-story brick building that looked like it had been built in the 1970s and never updated since. Terrence followed the ambulance in his truck, not because anyone asked him to, not because he had any reason to, but because leaving felt wrong in a way he couldn't explain. He parked in the visitor lot and sat there for a long time, watching the emergency entrance, watching the paramedics wheel the stretchers inside, watching the doors close behind them. His hands were still shaking. His palms were still bleeding from a glass. His shirt was gone, and he was sitting there bare-chested in his truck, like a man who had lost something important. Go home, he told himself. You did your part. It's over. These people have families. They have money. They have a whole life that has nothing to do with you. He started the engine, put the truck in reverse, made it halfway out of the parking space before he stopped again. Benjamin's voice was still in his head. Save her first. She's everything. Terrence turned off the engine. He found an old jacket in the back seat, put on over his bare chest, and walked into the hospital. The waiting room was small and mostly empty. Plastic chairs, old magazines, a television mounted in the corner, playing news that no one was watching. A woman at the front desk looked up when he entered, her eyes doing that quick assessment he was used to, taking in his worn clothes, his dirty face, the cuts on his hands. Can I help you? The couple from the car accident. The ones they just brought in. I wanted to check on them. Are you family? No, I'm the one who found them, who called it in. Her expression softened slightly. Have a seat. Someone will update you when they can. Terrence sat. He waited. Minutes turned into an hour. An hour turned into 2. Nurses came and went. Doctors rushed past with clipboards and serious faces. No one told him anything. He should have left. Every reasonable part of his brain said this wasn't his business, that he had done what he could, that staying here accomplished nothing. But every time he stood up to go, something pulled him back down. Finally, a doctor appeared. Young, tired, wearing scrubs that had seen better days. Are you here about the Hartwells? Terrence stood. Yes. How are they? The woman, Margaret, she's stable. The head wound looked worse than it was. She needed stitches and she has a concussion, but she should recover. However, the doctor paused, choosing his words carefully. She's experiencing some confusion, memory issues. It might be temporary, a result of the trauma, or it might be something else. We're running tests. And the husband, Benjamin? The doctor's face changed, that slight tightening around the eyes that people get when the news isn't good. He went into surgery an hour ago. Internal bleeding. His condition is serious. We're doing everything we can, but I have to be honest with you. The next 24 hours are critical. Terrence felt something heavy settle in his chest. Is he going to make it? I don't know. We're hopeful, but there are no guarantees. Does she know? His wife. She's been asking for him. We told her he's being treated. But she's confused about the details. She doesn't fully understand what happened. Terrence nodded slowly. Can I see her? The doctor hesitated. Are you family? No, I was there at the accident. I stayed with them until help came. Something passed across the doctor's face. Recognition, maybe, or gratitude. Room 112. Down the hall. Second door on the left. But keep it brief. She needs rest. Terrence walked down the hallway, his boots echoing on the linoleum floor. Room 112. The door was partially open. He knocked softly and stepped inside. Margaret Hartwell looked smaller in the hospital bed than she had in the car. Fragile. Old in a way she probably hadn't seen before the accident, before the world cracked open and rearranged everything she knew. Her head was bandaged. Her eyes were closed. For a moment, Terrence thought she was asleep. Then she opened her eyes and looked at him. Hello, she said. Her voice was thin, uncertain. Do I know you? Terrence didn't know how to answer. I was there at the accident. I helped you. She blinked, processing this information slowly. There was an accident. Yes, ma'am. On Miller Road. Your car flipped over. Miller Road. She repeated the words like she was trying to remember what they meant. Were we going somewhere? I don't know, ma'am. She looked around the room, at the beeping machines, the white walls, the windows showing a parking lot she didn't recognize. Her breathing quickened. Her hands gripped the blanket. Where am I? Where's my husband? Where's Benjamin? He's here in the hospital. The doctors are taking care of him. I want to see him. I need to see him. He's in surgery right now. You'll see him soon. Her eyes filled with tears. Not the quiet kind. The frightened kind. The kind that comes when the world stops making sense and nothing feels safe anymore. I don't understand. I don't understand what's happening. Why can't I remember? Why does everything feel wrong? Terrence stood there, helpless. This wasn't his job. This wasn't his responsibility. He was a stranger to this woman. A man she wouldn't recognize on the street. A man she would never have spoken to if their lives hadn't collided on a dirt road in the middle of nowhere. But she was scared. So scared. And there was no one else in the room. No family, no friends, no one but him. "Ma'am," he said quietly, "you were in an accident. You hit your head. The doctors say your memory might be confused for a while, but it should come back. You just need to rest." But I'm alone. I'm all alone here. The words hit him harder than they should have. Maybe because he knew what alone felt like. Maybe because he had spent most of his life in rooms where no one was coming, waiting for people who never showed up. He didn't plan what he said next. It just came out the way things do when your heart moves faster than your brain. "You're not alone." She looked at him, really looked at him, and for a moment her eyes cleared. "You stayed. From the accident." "Yes, ma'am." "Why?" Terrence didn't have a good answer. He didn't have any answer. So he just told her the truth. Because someone had to. She reached out and took his hand. Her grip was weak, her fingers cold, but she held on like he was the only solid thing in a world that had turned to water. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you for not leaving." Terrence sat with her until she fell asleep. Then he sat with her some more, watching the monitors, listening to her breathe, wondering what he was supposed to do now. A nurse came in around midnight. "Visiting hours are over. Are you family?" "No." "Then you'll need to leave." Terrence stood up. Margaret's hand was still holding his, even in sleep. He gently pulled away, careful not to wake her. How long will she be here? A few days at least, maybe longer, depending on the test results. The nurse looked at him with something like curiosity. "You've been here for hours. Most people just give a statement and leave." "I know. Why did you stay?" Terrence looked at Margaret, small and fragile in that hospital bed, lost in a world that no longer made sense to her. "She asked me if she was alone," he said. "I couldn't say yes." He went home that night, but he couldn't sleep. He lay in his bed staring at the ceiling, thinking about Benjamin in surgery, about Margaret waking up confused and frightened, about the life he had accidentally stepped into. The next morning, he was back at the hospital. And the morning after that, and the morning after that. Benjamin survived the surgery, but didn't wake up. The doctors used words like coma, uncertain prognosis, and "we'll have to wait and see." They said his brain needed time to heal. They said there was no way to know how long it would take. Days, weeks, maybe longer. Margaret's memory came and went like weather. Some moments she remembered the accident, remembered Terrence, remembered bits and pieces of her life. Other moments she was lost, asking the same questions over and over, not recognizing nurses, not understanding why she was there. She kept asking for Benjamin. Every day, every hour sometimes. "Where's my husband? When can I see him?" The doctors explained, the nurses explained, but the explanations didn't stick. Her mind couldn't hold on to them. Every time she woke up, she was starting over. On the fourth day, something changed. Margaret had a bad episode. She woke up screaming, thrashing in her bed, convinced she was trapped in the car again, convinced Benjamin was dying next to her. It took 3 nurses to calm her down. Terrence was in the waiting room when it happened. He heard the commotion, heard her screaming, and without thinking he walked into her room. "Mrs. Hartwell," he said. "Mrs. Hartwell, it's okay. You're safe. You're in the hospital." She stopped struggling. She looked at him with wild eyes, breathing hard, tears streaming down her face. "The accident," she gasped. "The car. Benjamin. Is he dead? Is my husband dead?" "No, he's alive. He's here in the hospital. Just down the hall. He's resting. I want to see him. Please, I need to see him." The nurses exchanged glances. One of them pulled Terrence aside. "She can't see him. Not yet. He's in the ICU. She's too unstable. The shock, could make things worse. Then what do I tell her? Tell her he's resting. Tell her she'll see him soon. Tell her whatever keeps her calm. Terence went back to Margaret's bedside. She grabbed his hand again. The same desperate grip. Please, she said. Please tell me he's okay. Please tell me I'm not alone. Terence looked at this woman, this stranger who had become something else over the past 4 days. Something he couldn't name. He thought about the truth, and he thought about mercy, and he realized that sometimes those two things couldn't exist in the same room. He's okay, Terence said. He's resting, and you're not alone. I'm here. I'm not going anywhere. It was a lie. A merciful lie. The kind of lie you tell when the truth would break someone who's already broken. Margaret's grip relaxed. Her breathing slowed. She looked at him with something like trust, something like gratitude, something that made him feel both honored and terrified. You'll stay, she asked. I'll stay. Promise? Terence thought about his empty house, his empty life, all the reasons he should walk away and all the reasons he couldn't. I promise. That was the moment everything changed. Not the accident, not the hospital. This promise to a confused old woman who had no one else. This lie that became a commitment. This single word that would reshape his entire life. He didn't know it then, but he had just become responsible for 2 people he barely knew. And the weight of that responsibility was about to pull him into something far bigger than he ever imagined. You're listening to an original story from the official Shiny Stories channel. The hospital called on the 7th day. Margaret was ready to be discharged, but there was a problem. She can't live alone, the doctor said. Not in her current condition. Her memory is too unreliable. She forgets to eat. She forgets her medication. She tried to leave her room 3 times yesterday because she couldn't remember where she was. What about her husband? Still in the coma. No change. Could be days, could be weeks, could be longer. Does she have family? Someone who can take her? We've been trying to reach her son. The number in her file goes to voicemail. We've left messages, but no response yet. Terence stood in the hospital hallway. Phone pressed his ear, feeling the weight of something he didn't ask for settling onto his shoulders. What happens if no one comes? We'd have to transfer her to a care facility. There's one about 2 hours from here. It's not ideal, but we don't have the beds to keep her. A care facility 2 hours away, full of strangers, for a woman who woke up scared every morning, who reached for her husband's hand in her sleep, who trusted Terence because he was the only familiar face in a world that had become unrecognizable. Give me a day, Terence said. Let me figure something out. He hung up and stood there for a long time, staring at the wall, thinking about what he was about to do. It was crazy. It made no sense. He had no money, no training, no business taking care of anyone. But he thought about Margaret's face when she asked if she was alone. He thought about the promise he made. He thought about what his mother would say if she could see him now. The next morning, he brought Margaret home. Not to her home. She didn't remember where that was. Not to a facility full of strangers. To his home. The small wooden house at the edge of town with the leaky roof and the creaky floors, and nothing in the refrigerator but leftovers and hope. She stood in the doorway looking around with those confused eyes, tried to make sense of a place that didn't match any of her memories. This isn't my house, she said. No, ma'am. It's mine. Why am I here? Because you needed somewhere safe and I have room. It wasn't really a lie. He did have room. 1 bedroom that he gave to her. 1 couch that he slept on, 1 bathroom they shared, 1 kitchen where he learned to cook things she could eat. The first few days were hard. Margaret woke up disoriented every morning, sometimes crying, sometimes calling for Benjamin, sometimes not recognizing Terence at all. He learned to be patient. He learned to explain things slowly, gently, without frustration. He learned that some questions didn't need answers, just presence. Where's my husband? He's resting at the hospital. You'll see him soon. When can I go home? When you're stronger, when you're ready. Who are you? I'm Terence. I'm helping you. She would nod, accepting this the way she accepted everything now. Not because she understood, but because she was too tired to fight. He learned her rhythms. She liked oatmeal in the morning with honey, not sugar. She liked sitting on the porch in the afternoon when the sun was warm. She liked it when he read to her from the newspaper, even though she forgot the stories 5 minutes later. She called him by wrong names sometimes. David, Thomas. Once she called him Benjamin, and Terrence had to leave the room for a moment to collect himself. But slowly, something shifted. She started recognizing him. Not always, but more often. She started expecting him to be there. When she woke up, she started saying his name correctly. Terrence. Yes, ma'am. Thank you for the oatmeal. You're welcome. Small things, ordinary things, but they meant something. Terrence's life changed in ways he didn't expect. He stopped drinking the beer he kept in the back of the fridge because he needed to be sharp in case she needed him at night. He started cleaning the house, really cleaning it, because she deserved better than dust and clutter. He fixed the step on the porch that had been broken for 2 years because he was afraid she might trip. For the first time in a long time, he had a reason to wake up in the morning. Someone to cook for, someone to check on, someone who needed him. He visited Benjamin every day, driving to hospital after Margaret's afternoon nap, sitting beside the old man's bed, talking to him, even though he never responded. Your wife is okay, Terrence would say. She's safe. She's eating. She asks about you every day. You need to wake up, Mr. Hartwell. She needs you to wake up. The machines beeped. The monitors glowed. Benjamin lay still, somewhere between life and death, between this world and whatever comes next. One afternoon, Margaret found an old photograph on Terrence's bookshelf. A woman. And a young boy smiling at the camera, standing in front of a house that looked a lot like this one. Who are they? She asked. Terrence looked at the photo. He hadn't looked at it in years. Had trained himself not to see it. My mother, he said, and me, a long time ago. She's beautiful. Where's she now? Gone. 15 years. I'm sorry. Margaret set the photo down gently. Do you have other family? No, ma'am. Just me? She was quiet for a moment, processing this information with her fragmented mind. Then she looked at him with eyes that were suddenly clear, suddenly sharp. That's very lonely. Yes, ma'am. It is. Well, she reached out and patted his hand the way a mother might. Then I suppose we have each other now. Terrence didn't know what to say. He felt something crack open in his chest, something he had kept sealed for years. He wanted to tell her that she didn't owe him anything, that she had a real family somewhere, that this was temporary. But he couldn't, because in that moment, sitting in his small living room with this confused old woman who had somehow become the center of his world, he realized something he wasn't ready to admit. He didn't want her to leave. The days turned into a week. The week turned into 2. Margaret grew stronger. Her memory stayed unreliable, but her body healed. She started helping around the house in small ways, folding laundry, drying dishes, watering the one plant Terrence kept on the windowsill. You need more plants, she told him one morning. This house needs life. I'm not very good with plants, ma'am. I'll teach you. I used to have a garden, I think. She frowned, trying to remember. Yes, a garden with roses. Benjamin built me a greenhouse 1 year for my birthday. That sounds nice. It was... Her eyes grew distant. I miss it. I miss a lot of things I can't remember. That night, after Margaret went to sleep, Terrence sat on the porch and looked at the stars. He thought about the life this woman had lived. The garden she couldn't quite remember. The husband lying in a hospital bed 30 miles away. The son who still hadn't called back. He thought about his own life. The emptiness. The jobs that led nowhere. The relationships that never started. All the time he had spent being invisible, being alone, being nobody to anyone. And now this strange family that had no name. This responsibility he never asked for. This feeling he couldn't quite identify. For the first time in as long as he could remember, Terrence didn't feel invisible. He felt seen. He felt needed. He felt like he mattered to someone. It was terrifying because he knew it couldn't last. He knew that eventually Margaret's family would come. Her son would answer his phone. Her husband would wake up. And when that happened, she would go back to her real life, her real home, her real people, and Terrence would be alone again. But that was a problem for another day. Tonight, the stars were bright, the house was quiet, and somewhere inside, an old woman who trusted him was sleeping peacefully. That had to be enough for now. That had to be enough. What Terrence didn't know was that the quiet wouldn't last much longer. The sun had finally gotten the messages, and he was already on his way. Original audio by Shiny Stories. Small towns have long memories and short patience for things they don't understand. Terrence had lived here his whole life. 47 years of being the quiet one. The one who kept himself. The one who worked hard and asked for nothing and never caused trouble. He thought that counted for something. He thought people knew who he was. He was wrong. The whispers started at the grocery store. Terrence was buying oatmeal and honey, the kind Margaret liked, when he noticed cashier watching him differently. Not the usual indifference. Something else. Something sharp. "Heard you got company out at your place," she said, not quite looking at him. "Yes, ma'am." Old white lady. From that accident on Miller Road. "Yes, ma'am." She scanned the oatmeal slowly. Folks are talking. Folks always talk. They're saying it's strange. A man like you taking in a woman like her. Terrence didn't ask what she meant by a man like you. He didn't need to. He had heard those words his whole life in 100 different forms from 100 different mouths. He just paid for his groceries and left. But the whispers didn't stop. They grew. At the gas station, you see him driving to the hospital every day. What's he after? At the diner, I heard she's rich. Real rich. And confused. Can't remember her own name half the time. At the feed store, a black man living with a wealthy white woman who can't think straight. Something ain't right about that. Terrence ignored it. He had spent his whole life ignoring things that hurt, pushing them down, keeping his head low and his mouth shut. That was how you survived in a place like this. You didn't fight. You didn't complain. You just kept moving. But the whispers had a way of turning into something worse. The police came on a Tuesday afternoon. 2 officers, the same ones from before, standing on his porch with their hands on their belts and their eyes full of questions. "Mr. Terrence, we need to talk." Margaret was inside, napping in the bedroom. Terrence stepped out onto the porch and closed the door behind him. "What's this about?" "We've received some concerns from members of the community." "What kind of concerns?" The older officer, the one with the mustache, shifted his weight. "People are worried about the elderly woman staying here. They're worried about her well-being, about whether she's being properly cared for." "She's being cared for fine. Is she here of her own free will?" "She's here because she has nowhere else to go. Her husband is in a coma. Her son won't answer phone. The hospital was going to send her to a facility 2 hours away. I offered to help and she agreed. Her memory comes and goes. Did she agree to that?" "Yes, but yes," she agreed. The officers exchanged looks. Terrence knew what they were thinking. He could see it in their faces, in the way they stood, in the careful distance they kept. "Mr. Terrence, we have to ask, is there any financial arrangement here? Any exchange of money or property?" Terrence felt something cold settle in his stomach. "No. You're not receiving any payment for her care?" "No. And you haven't accessed any of her accounts, her credit cards, her bank information?" "I don't even know her last name most days. She tells me, and then she forgets." The younger officer stepped forward. "Sir, we're not accusing you of anything. We're just following up on concerns. You understand how this looks, right? A man with no connection to these people suddenly taking care of an elderly woman who can't fully advocate for herself. I understand exactly how it looks. Then help us understand. Why are you doing this?" Terrence was quiet for a long moment. He looked past the officers at the road, at the fields beyond, at the town that had never really seen him despite all the years he had lived here. "Because no one else would," he said finally. "Because when I found them on that road, they were dying. Because the hospital couldn't keep her and her family didn't come. Because she was scared and alone, and I knew what that felt like." He met the officer's eyes directly. "I'm not asking you to believe me. I'm not asking you to understand. But I'm telling you the truth. I don't want her money. I don't want anything from her. I just didn't want her to wake up alone in some facility where no one knew her name. The officer stood there for a moment, uncertain. Then the older one nodded slowly. We'll need to verify some things. Talk to the hospital. Check the records. Standard procedure. Do what you need to do. And Mr. Terrence, it might help if we could locate her family. Get someone official involved. Terrence thought about the phone calls he had made. The messages left unanswered. The son in New York who was too busy, or too important, or too something to call back. I want that too, he said. I want you to find her people. I want her to be with someone who actually belongs to her. The officer looked surprised. You be okay with that? If her family came and took her away? She's not mine to keep. She never was. After they left, Terrence sat on the porch for a long time. The sun was setting, painting the sky orange and red. And somewhere inside, Margaret was waking up from her nap, probably confused again, probably wonder where she was and why nothing looked familiar. He should feel relieved. He had told the truth. He had nothing to hide. The police would investigate and find nothing wrong. And eventually, Margaret's family would come, and this strange chapter of his life would close. But he didn't feel relieved. He felt tired, bone tired. The kind of tired that comes from carrying something heavy for so long that you forget what it's like to stand up straight. The next few days were worse. The investigation continued. More questions, more looks, more whispers that stopped when he walked into a room. Margaret noticed something was wrong. Even with her fractured memory, she could feel the tension when they went to town, could see the way people stared. Why do they look at you like that? She asked one afternoon, sitting beside him on the porch. Like what? Like you've done something wrong. Terrence didn't answer right away. He watched a bird land on the railing, peck at nothing, fly away. Because they don't understand, he said finally. People don't understand things that don't fit the story they already believe. What story? That people like me don't help people like you. That there has to be a reason, a catch, something I'm getting out of it. Margaret was quiet for a moment. Then she reached over and took his hand. Do you know what I think? What's that? I think they're wrong. I think you're a good man. And I think good men are so rare that people forget what they look like. Terrence felt his eyes sting. He blinked it away. Thank you, ma'am. Margaret. Call me Margaret. You've earned that. That night, he got a phone call from the police station. Mr. Terrence, we've made contact with the family. The son, he's on his way. Should arrive tomorrow morning. Terrence hung up the phone and stood in his kitchen, looking at the dishes drying in the rack, at the oatmeal container on the counter, at all the small signs of a life that had changed without his permission. Tomorrow, everything would be different. Tomorrow the son would arrive, and Terrence would have to explain himself to someone who had money, power, and every reason to believe the worst. He didn't sleep that night. He just sat on the porch, watching the stars, waiting for morning. Thanks for listening on the official Shiny Stories channel. The black SUV arrived at 9:47 in the morning. Terrence knew because he'd been watching the road since dawn, waiting for the moment his strange new life would end. It was the kind of vehicle that didn't belong here. Sleek, expensive, tinted windows that hid whoever was inside. It rolled down the dirt road slowly, like it was afraid of getting dirty, and stopped in front of Terrence's house with an engine so quiet it barely made a sound. The door opened. A man stepped out. Vincent Hartwell was everything his father had described, and more. Tall, fit, mid-40s but looked younger, the way rich people do when they have time and money to take care of themselves. He wore a gray suit that probably cost more than Terrence's truck. His shoes were polished so bright they reflected the morning sun. He stood there for a moment, looking at the house, at the peeling paint, at the sagging roof, at the broken step Terrence had finally fixed but still looked rough around the edges. His expression said everything. Disgust, disbelief, confusion. This is where my mother has been living? Terrence stepped out onto the porch. The two men looked at each other across 15 feet of dirty yard, and the distance between them felt like miles, like oceans, like everything that separated one world from another. Mr. Hartwell, who are you? No greeting, no thank you, just a question that sounded like an accusation. My name is Terrence. I'm the one who found your parents. After the accident. Vincent's jaw tightened. And you brought my mother here? To this place? The hospital discharged her. She couldn't live alone. You weren't answering your phone. I was out of the country. Business. I came as soon as I got the messages. Your father's been in a coma for 2 weeks. Your mother's been scared and confused and asking for family that never came. I'm glad your business is doing well. The words came out harder than Terrence intended. He saw Vincent's eyes flash, saw his hands clench at his sides. You don't know anything about my situation. You're right. I don't. I just know your mother needed help, and I was the only one here to give it. The front door opened behind Terrence. Margaret stepped out, still in her robe, her hair uncombed, looking between the two men with confused eyes. What's happening? Who is that? Vincent's expression changed completely. The hardness melted. Something raw and vulnerable took its place. Mom. Margaret stared at him. Terrence watched her face, watched her struggle to place this stranger in the fractured puzzle of her memory. For a long, terrible moment, she didn't recognize her own son. Then something clicked. Her eyes widened. Her hand went to her mouth. Vincent? Is that you? Vincent crossed the yard in 3 long strides. He took his mother in his arms, held her tight, and Terrence could see his shoulders shaking. I'm here, Mom. I'm sorry it took so long. I'm here now. Vincent. My Vincent. Margaret touched his face like she was making sure he was real. You're so grown up. When did you get so grown up? Mom, I'm 46 years old. Are you? That doesn't seem right. Wasn't it just last week you were starting college? Vincent looked at Terrence over his mother's head. The suspicion was still there, but now it was mixed with something else. Fear. The fear of a man realizing his mother was not the woman he remembered. What's wrong with her? The doctors say it's the head injury. Her memory comes and goes. Some days are better than others. Will she get better? They don't know. Vincent held his mother tighter. And my father? How is he? Still in the coma. I visit him every day. I talk to him. I don't know if he can hear me, but I figure it can't hurt. Margaret pulled back from her son's embrace. Benjamin. Is Benjamin coming too? Vincent's face crumpled. Dad's resting, Mom. He's going to be okay. I want to see him. I miss him. I'll take you to see him today. I promise. Terrence stood there, feeling like an intruder in his own home. This was their moment, their family. He didn't belong here. He had never belonged here. I'll give you some space, he said quietly and turned to go inside. Wait. Vincent's voice stopped him. We need to talk. After I get my mother settled. It wasn't a request. It was an order. The kind of order that comes from a man who is used to being obeyed. I'll be here, Terrence said. The next 2 hours were strange. Vincent took Margaret to the hospital to see Benjamin, and Terrence stayed behind, alone in his own house for the first time in 2 weeks. It felt empty, too quiet. He kept looking toward the bedroom, expecting to hear Margaret moving around, expecting her to call his name. When Vincent returned, his mother wasn't with him. She wanted to stay at the hospital. I hired a private nurse to sit with her. He stood in Terrence's kitchen like he was conducting a business meeting. Now you and I need to have a conversation. Okay. First, I want to thank you for what you did at the accident. The doctors told me that without your intervention, my mother might not have survived. I did what anyone would do. No, you didn't. Most people would have driven past. Most people would have called 911 and left. You stayed. You kept pressure on her wound. You kept my father conscious until help arrived. Terrence didn't know what to say to that, so he said nothing. But I have questions, Vincent continued, and I need honest answers. Ask, why did you bring my mother here, to your home, instead of letting the hospital handle it? The hospital was going to transfer her to a care facility 2 hours away, a place full of strangers. She was scared. She didn't understand what was happening. I couldn't let them send her somewhere like that. So you just decided to take her yourself? Someone had to. Vincent studied him. Terrence could feel himself being evaluated, measured, judged. Do you know who my family is? How much money we have? No, and I don't care. My father built one of the largest engineering firms in the country. My mother comes from old money. I run a private equity firm that manages over $2 billion in assets. That's nice for you. What I'm saying is that my family has resources, significant resources. If you were hoping to benefit from this situation somehow, Mr. Hartwell, Terrence's voice was quiet but firm. I'm going to stop you right there. I didn't know who your parents were when I pulled them from that car. I didn't know when I sat with your mother in the hospital. I didn't know when I brought her here and slept on my own couch so she could have a bed. And now that I do know, it doesn't change anything. You expect me to believe that? I don't expect anything from you, but I'm telling you the truth. Your mother needed help. I helped. That's the whole story. Vincent was quiet for a long moment. Terrence could see him struggling, trying to fit the situation into a framework that made sense. Rich people always needed reasons. They couldn't accept that someone might do something for nothing because they never did. I've had people look into you, Vincent said finally, since I got the police report. I know you have no criminal record. I know you've lived here your whole life. I know you work odd jobs and barely make ends meet. I'm sure that's all very interesting to you. What's interesting to me is that you appear to be exactly what you say you are, a man who helps strangers for no apparent reason. There's nothing apparent about it. I helped because they needed help. That's all. Why? Because my mother raised me to believe that you don't leave people alone when they're suffering. Because I've been alone my whole life, and I know how it feels. Because your mother looked at me and asked if she was alone, and I couldn't tell her yes. Something shifted in Vincent's face. A crack in the armor. She asked you that? In the hospital. First night. She was scared, confused, didn't know where she was or what happened. And she asked me if she was alone. I told her she wasn't. I stayed because of that. You could have walked away at any point. I could have, but I made her a promise. Vincent turned away, walked to the window, looked out at the dusty road and the empty fields. My father and I haven't spoken properly in 3 years. Business disagreement. We both said things we shouldn't have. I kept meaning to call, to make things right, but there was always something more urgent. Another deal, another meeting, another excuse. He turned back to Terrence. And while I was being too busy and too important, a stranger was sitting by his bed, talking to him, making sure he wasn't alone. He mentioned you at the accident, said he wasn't a good father, said you were busy and important. He said that. He also said he regretted it. The distance. He said your mother raised you because he was always working. Vincent's composure cracked. For just a moment, Terrence saw the boy underneath. The son who missed his father, who wanted things to be different, who had let pride and time build walls he didn't know how to take down. I've spent my whole life trying to be like him. Successful, driven, important. And I ended up repeating his worst mistake. He's still alive, Mr. Hartwell. You still have time. Maybe. Vincent straightened his shoulders, rebuilt his walls. I'm taking my mother back to New York. I have resources there. Better doctors, full-time care. I understand. She might not want to go. She seems attached to you. She's attached to feeling safe. Once she's with her family, she'll be fine. Vincent nodded slowly. He reached into his jacket and pulled out an envelope. This is for you. For everything you've done. Terrence looked at the envelope, but didn't take it. I don't want your money. It's not charity. It's payment for services rendered. I didn't render services. I help people. There's a difference. Vincent stared at him, genuinely confused. Everyone wants something. Everyone has a price. Then I guess I'm not everyone. He left the envelope on the counter. Terrence didn't touch it. That night, Margaret was back at the hospital, sitting with Benjamin. Vincent was at the only hotel in town, making phone calls, arranging logistics. And Terrence was alone in his house for the first time in weeks. He sat on the porch. The stars were out. The crickets were singing. Everything was exactly as it had been before the accident, before the hospital, before Margaret and Benjamin and Vincent and all of it. But nothing felt the same. Nothing felt right, because tomorrow they would leave, and Terrence would go back to being invisible, Back to being nobody. Back to the empty life he had been living before a car flipped on a dirt road and changed everything. He didn't know it yet, but the story wasn't over. Not by a long shot. Because Benjamin Hartwell was about to wake up. And when he did, he would remember everything. The accident, the man who stopped, the promise that was made. And nothing Vincent believed about Terrence would survive that conversation. You're listening to an original story from the official Whispered Wisdom Tales channel.